All right, well, we will go ahead and get started here. First and foremost, we just want to thank everyone for tuning in today and participating. We ask that if you can please keep your microphone muted unless being asked to interact by the presenter. We do have the chat function here as well, so if you have any questions, feel free to use that for any concerns, questions, comments. In addition, this session is being recorded, so we can post it onto our NERSA page at the end. And so without further ado, I will go ahead and introduce one of our speakers. We have Shayna Kessler. She is the Intramural Sports and Special Events Coordinator at Central Washington University. She's been there since September of 2019, but she has had a numerous amount of experience within intramural sports, club sports, special events, aquatics, marketing, and facility operations.
I will introduce our other speaker. Samantha is the sport club coordinator at Central Washington University. She has completed her Master of Education in Sports Management at Millersville University and received her Bachelor of Science from the University of Maryland in International Business while working in the intramural department. And throughout her time working in campus recreation, she had the opportunity to volunteer at different NERSA events too, including the regional tournaments and national conferences as well. Yep, thank you. We'll send it off to you guys.
All right. Let's get some screen sharing going. Let's see how this works. Cool. Nifty. All right, welcome everybody. So our session is on networking, especially in the time of COVID, focusing on how to build connections for your future. So I'm Shayna Kessler, as Jasmine introduced. My pronouns are actually they, them, theirs. And my co-presenter today is my neighbor, friend, and coworker, Sam. Sam, you want to say hi?
Hi, my pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm mainly focused in sport clubs, but thanks to COVID, I'm also helping out with Group X. So COVID, welcome.
Yep. And in times of not COVID, you also do camps and you also did our website. So some marketing going on there.
Yes. Yep. So
we wear many hats.
Be versatile. That's another great thing to do.
So the idea with our presentation today is it is designed to be interactive. We do want to hear from you. So please, at any given point in time, if you have a question or an idea or something that you want to share, interrupt us. We want to hear you speak. We want to hear what you have to say. And there will be times where I may call you out to answer something if we pose it to the crowd and everybody's sitting in silence. I have no shame in picking on people. So I would much prefer that people volunteer to speak because I know that it can be uncomfortable for some to be put on the spot. But at the same time, this is designed to be an interactive session for you all. So participation is strongly encouraged. So that's us. Those are pictures from our website. We don't really look like that anymore. Your hair is lighter and mine is curly, so is what it is. But those are our formal titles on the screen in case you forgot in the last 30 seconds of triple introductions. So some of the things we're going to talk about today, we'll be recognizing how we can network, why it's important, and how to do that during COVID. So if this is your kind of first foray into doing this sort of professional development type of networking, things that are going to benefit you in the long term and the short term, it's very different than what you might have been expecting. And if you've done networking before COVID happened, this looks a little bit different. And so we're going to talk about different tools that we have at our disposal, why these things are important to do, and a little bit of the how-to with doing them. So we all know networking is so awkward. It's not even funny. It's awkward when you're in person. It's awkward when you have to do it virtually. It's awkward when you have to just introduce yourself to somebody. It's awkward when you walk into a room and you don't know a single person in there. It's awkward when you do know some people in there, but you don't know how to like interrupt their little cluster to say hi or introduce yourself to other people. 110% of the time, networking is an awkward experience. So first and foremost, you got to own that and recognize that that's the same experience for everybody. The extroverts, the social butterflies, it's as weird for them as it is for the introverts and the ambiverts who might be even more uncomfortable in those situations. So what are some examples of networking? Anybody? Networking, you might have, sorry, go ahead.
How about this conference?
Absolutely, yes, thank you, Ross. This conference is a great example of networking. So this is something that we're doing in a virtual setting. In the past, student lead-on traditionally takes place in person, but it's essentially at its core the same conference, the same people, the same types of presentations. What are some examples of networking that you've seen prior to COVID-19 hitting us and changing the entire landscape of what we know to be normal?
As a student, a lot of people think, networking just happens in your career, but with your teachers, it's important to have those as good contacts as well.
Mm-hmm.
A great point. More often than not, your professors can actually help connect you to people in the field and be that stepping stone.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some other newer forms of networking that you've done since COVID-19 in this wild 67-month-long year of 2020?
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. I'm going to talk about that in a bit. These are all great examples.
Yes, there's some great ones popping up in the chat as well.
I can't see the chat on my screen. You want to share what's in the chat?
Yeah, so workshops, social media, emailing, mentor programs that are out there. They're all great ways. LinkedIn, Darcy mentioned as well. So placements and co-ops, yes, there are those programs out there in those universities, colleges that co-ops are a huge program, and they are definitely beneficial because once again, it's that stepping stone into the career world from school. So kind of connecting the two bubbles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in the past, networking specific events like state workshops, regional conferences, professional conferences, all these different types of things would have happened. Volunteer opportunities, whether they're within NERSA or within your communities or within your profession, if it's parallel to collegiate rec, but not necessarily in it. All of those opportunities have previously existed for us. They look a little bit different now. Some of the new traditions that we've established in the last 10 months have been things like webinars, virtual conferences, 10,000 Zoom meetings a week, and the Nurse Ideas in Motion, which started at the very beginning of our campus closures and has continued to this day. So that's been a different experience for us.
Yes.
So
Darcy also threw out some great ones down here in the chat as well. The informational interviews and 10,000 coffees. Shayna mentioned when we were chatting once of how have the coffee over Zoom now, and then once you get back into person, sit down and have a real coffee with them. So you've already established that connection. Now you're just meeting in person. So go ahead, Shayna, keep rolling.
Yeah. So a thing to think about that can be hard to tangibly understand is who is in your network and why are the people in your network important to be there? So you have your first connections, right? You have the people that you know from your own workspace, your office, your direct supervisors, the relationships that are immediately around you, who you are going to school with, who you've worked with in the past, things like that, those established relationships. when you're thinking about those connections within your network, you have to also consider, do they know your field? Do I know their field? Are there translatable, transferable skills from you to them or vice versa, things that you can mutually benefit each other with as you seek professional networking? And consider too, how well do you know them and how well do they know you as a person? Because if you're looking to have people speak to your character or make introductions, you want that authenticity of knowing each other. Second connections are going to be people who your other connections know, who you are able to be then introduced to. And those are going to be situations where you have to think about, have I met them before in passing, but haven't had a real conversation with them yet? Would knowing them help build my network? Is knowing them going to be a mutual benefit, right? These relationships aren't one-sided. And then how well are you going to be able to nurture those relationships if you start to establish them? Because again, that authenticity is very important there. So that's going to be people like, who mentored your mentor? Can they make an introduction? Who is the person who previously held your position? Are you able to connect with them, find out where they are now, and see what, how you can connect with each other to see how you can better understand their reasons for leaving, their reasons for growing. If things were in good standing, that's usually a lot easier than if somebody left in not so good standing. But just as an example, I have a really good relationship with the person who held the position before me at Central. You know, he left for his reasons and is still doing intramural sports work elsewhere. And prior to COVID, he came back and visited multiple times, and it was great. Those kinds of relationships, when possible, can be really helpful, because then I can pick his brain about, you know, what was it like for you 2 years ago when you started this job? And, you know, here's some of the areas where I'm struggling, or like this student staff member that I inherited from you is giving me a hard time. What tips do you have? Things like that. Those relationships, again, are really essential to your growth in the immediate moment and in the long term.
And I think it's also important to remember that someone who may be a second connection now, the more you get to know them, they're going to help grow into your first connection. And that one person that maybe started out on, you know, you're outside of your bubble, they'll be able to connect you to people. One story that I'm going to share at Shayna, I'm going to jump it in and throw it in here now. But when I met Shayna, I was at my first Maryland tournament after graduating as a student. It was Saturday night. We had just finished Saturday rounds of games, and literally in tornadoes Shayna into my life. I had no clue who this person was that was coming into the room. And they introduced themselves and they took me to go meet all these people that I hadn't met yet. So they kind of went from my third connection to my first connection real quick, but with their help, I've been able to connect with so many more people, and it all just started at one Maryland tournament, sharing one hotel room, and they are probably one of the best connections that I now have in NERSA, because they know so many people. So Shayna is a great resource for learning how to connect with people. So they whirlwind in my life, and we are still going strong. So you never know when that connection will happen and when that connection to grow will happen. So take every moment as a learning opportunity to maybe move someone from a second connection to a first connection, or meet someone who you want to be that third, you know, that third connection of, I'm seeing this person do something and that's something that I really want to do. How can I get to know that person or be that person or grow in those skills? So just think about it. I am definitely an introvert, so I'm more of the non-traditional ways of meeting people. I'm not someone to just go up and shake someone's hand. So we can chat more about some of those different experiences later on in the presentation, but I just think it's important to take every opportunity to like continually think about how can you continue to grow as a person and continue to grow these connections as well. Go ahead, Shayna.
Yeah. Throughout this whole experience of doing things like this lead on, you've seen presenters and you've informally met people who might be in positions of leadership or have some amount of power or weight within NERSA or whatever parallel field you have. That those are the people you aspire to know, and those are your third connections. So now you have to figure out, how do I get to know them? How do I get to start building that relationship? How do I get that third connection to become a second and a first connection, somebody that I want to know and then can know and build that authentic relationship. So the story of me and Sam meeting is a great example, because we met through a volunteer opportunity with the Nurse Championship Series, worked, a billion tournaments it felt like together, met up at the annual conference in Boston, and went out to dinner and, had a blast. And now we're at the same university. Like, that all happened in a 2.5-year period. And so it's a fun experience to see where people grow and where they get to become the different people that participate in your professional life. Like, it's pretty cool. Still awkward as heck, but pretty cool. So some of these things have been mentioned, but use the resources that have literally been handed to you, please. We have the NERSA Mentor-Mentee program. If you haven't signed up for that yet to either be a mentor or be a mentee, please do so. It is an awesome experience. You're going to get paired with somebody who wants to help you build these connections, wants to help you grow, wants to be a place for you to talk about your experiences and help you navigate all of these different things that are being thrown at you in a very strange time. And this is a program that's been going on for years. You may have, your mentors outside of that specific program. This isn't going to replace those relationships. This is going to add a new one in. The NERSA student leadership team is going to pair you up with somebody who they think is going to work well with you to help you grow as a person and as a young professional. So take advantage of things like that. Same thing with the NERSA caucuses. Those are opportunities for you to find your niche group. So if you are an LGBTQ person, if you are a Black person, if you are Asian, if whatever your identity is, there's a caucus for you to connect with people who have a similar or shared experience. And that can be really hard to find, especially in a small field like recreation. So being able to find that group that you can identify with best and know that you're not alone in here can be really, really helpful. You're never obligated to speak up at those events. You're never obligated to share anything about yourself. It can just be a good opportunity to listen to other people who have similar experiences to you and get that validation. And then if and when you're ready to start reaching out to them or speaking up at those caucuses, you can do so. They're never recorded either. So again, I 10 out of 10 recommend checking them out. You don't have to have your camera on. You don't have to say anything. And then social media is another one. We talked about LinkedIn a little bit. That's going to come up in a moment. But using social media, that is a tool that I think 99% of people at this point are using. It's a really helpful way to stay connected with people. Use the tools that already exist. And then again, take advantage of those ideas in motion roundtables and all of these other free opportunities that NERSA is throwing out there. And know too that ACE and NASPA and AOR are also doing things like this. They might not have quite as many as NERSA, but they are doing these different virtual opportunities for people to connect with each other. And so if that is an area that you're interested in, you should take advantage of it, especially while it's free. Social media etiquette. I am a big fan of using social media to share things that are important to me. So if you look at my Twitter, you will see a lot of stuff about social justice. It is 99% social justice and probably 1% sports. It used to be more of a 50-50 split, but in the last 10 years, or in the last 10 months, wow, it feels like 10 years, the way that I've used my social media channels have changed. It's not something that I'm hiding from my peers. It's not something that I'm ashamed of. It's like, I think I changed my avatar on Twitter to be like an anarchy symbol or something. I don't remember. But like, to me, that's reflective of who I am, and I'm being my authentic self in that space. I still am tweeting with my friends about bingo and trivia and whatever other NERSA affiliated or unaffiliated events we have going on. We're still talking about flag football and when that's going to happen. But don't feel like you have to censor who you are or have multiple accounts, or I know Finstagrams were a thing. I don't know if they still are a thing. I never understood that concept because there's nothing wrong with being you. If you really want to know somebody and they really want to know you, that's not going to be a barrier to stopping that. At the same time, don't post something of you, like, I don't know, doing a kegger upside down or whatever. Like, don't be stupid, I guess. Be mindful of it.
Yeah.
But don't feel like you can't be your authentic self. What your beliefs are, like, you're not going to want to work at a place where they don't align with your personality. That's not going to be a lasting working relationship. And so knowing that social media is often an extension of who we are and how we express ourselves is important.
And I think it's also a great way to find those icebreakers. So if you look at my social media, you will see a ton about my dog currently, but you will see me sharing out a lot about when the service dog program that I worked with. So, hey, I have a dog, you have a dog, let's chat about dogs for a second, because that'll help me break the ice to get to know you. Or, hey, I really love volunteering and helping people. So when, the national annual conference rolls around again and the regionals roll around again, maybe you take the minute or two to volunteer at a session or at a table or the career center, whatever it may be. That's where I made some of my best connections, because I was doing something I was comfortable with and I enjoyed doing. And then it broke down those barriers that terrify me. And I could start talking to these people without censoring myself or being self-conscious about what I was doing, because I was doing something that I already loved. So think about it that way as well. Like, don't go stalking people too much, but find things that you have in common, because it's a great way to also break that ice.
Feel free to find me on Twitter and Instagram. Good luck navigating either of those places, because my Instagram is like entirely cats. And like I said, my Twitter is mostly about social justice stuff. But again, if you want to read the things that are important to me so that you can start seeing, do we have commonalities, common interests, and build that relationship, that opportunity is available to you, right? I'm a big fan of keeping my social media public because I want to be accessible and I want to be my most authentic self. And like Sam said, it's a really great opportunity to find that common ground and connect with somebody. So who has a LinkedIn on this call? I do. Anyone else? Yeah. So handful of you. Cool. So LinkedIn is one of those social media networks where nobody really knows if it's totally necessary or not, right? It's like, we don't quite use it the way it was designed for, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. The benefit of having a LinkedIn is that if you don't have a super strong social media presence, or if the person is just looking to check, what school you graduated from or whatever, like you looked familiar, they want to check, where did I meet them before? What events have they worked, or universities have they been at, etc. It's a really quick and easy way for us to find people because it's network associated. So it's going to identify, a lot quicker than Facebook will, who's likely the person you're looking for if they have a common name. And so that's really helpful. When Sam and I were planning our regional flag football tournament, for example, we used it to try to identify what hotel rooms we needed, because some people had gender neutral names and gender wasn't a question that was asked to be an identifier on the application process. And so we used LinkedIn to look up people who had gender neutral names to double check, like, are they somebody who is male identifying or female identifying, and follow up with those people and make sure we're putting them in the right spaces for hotel blocks. When people don't have a LinkedIn, it does make it a lot harder to put a face to the name. If you keep it up to date, it can be useful. If you don't keep it up to date, it's certainly not going to be useful. And it's really going to be about taking that time to maintain it, check it every once in a while, and then again, it can be as useful as you make it out to be. But is it necessary? Debatable.
I think it also goes back to which field are you in. Some fields out there definitely rely a lot more on LinkedIn than maybe recreation does. But going back to what Shayna says, if you're not going to keep up with it, maybe it's not the thing for you. While it does have its pros and cons. So just think about it. And is it something that you are comfortable with? Is it something that you can show who you are through it as well? So
if you don't have a LinkedIn, or if you have an outdated LinkedIn and want help updating it, reach out to me. I love that kind of stuff. I'm a big fan, and I'm happy to help. So.
Vicky just had a great point. It's a great place to keep your updated resume. People may be able to find you and reach out to opportunities when they do come available. It's a very true point, especially as you are building those connections. If they're like, oh, hey, I remember I was talking to someone that was really interested in this and had this background, they can verify that it's you, and then they can kind of reach out to you and kind of offer you that, or at least give you that notice of, hey, we're posting this job. You should definitely look into it. Think it would be a great fit for you, things like that. So I think the key importance is making sure that if you do have it, keep it updated. So
yeah, and I'd say too, if you're not going to keep it updated, delete it, because it's also not a good look for somebody to look you up and find a barren page that's super outdated. It does have the appearance of you don't care enough, even if that's not the case and you're just primarily on other platforms and it hasn't been beneficial to you. Just delete it, get rid of it. They'll just, if they don't find you there, they're going to look you up somewhere else. So don't let that be your first impression. So next we'll talk about approaching someone virtually. So like I mentioned earlier, networking in person is awkward and uncomfortable. And it can also be equally as awkward and uncomfortable in a virtual space, especially because we have this barrier of a computer between us and maybe several thousand miles, who knows? So some things to consider. If you go to a presentation or a webinar that they hosted and they offer their email as a contact at the end of it, actually email them. We don't do that because it's the right thing to do or it's the trend. We do it because we actually want people to be able to follow up with us, ask questions, let us know if they liked it or if they have questions about it. Try to highlight one or two things that struck you as being helpful or important and ask if it's okay to follow up with them again. Again, it's about starting to build those relationships with the people that you want to know. If down the line you realize maybe this isn't the right avenue for you, like that's okay. You're not going to burn that bridge, but you're not going to necessarily develop that relationship as much as you might develop a different one.
One thing that I was always taught as a student is that following up with someone like that shows that you do care. And when I was a student, taking my business classes, a hiring kind of headhunter, I don't remember exactly her title, but she said that a thank you card had actually made the difference between who got hired. They had gotten it down to 2 or 3 applicants, and she remembered and pulled out this thank you card of this person who took the time to handwrite a card, send it to her, and she keeps all of them. And they were able to build that connection through the interview process, and it actually helped kind of build more of that connection and show that they were a great fit for the job. So it's never ever harmful to follow up and say thank you.
And then again, think about those people that are in your peripheral network. Who are those connections that somebody else already has that's in your network? Ask them to make an introduction. That's what I did with Sam, right? I just dragged her around and said, here, I need you to meet this person and this person and this person. They are all going to be helpful people for you to know. Also, they're cool and they're my friends. You should hang out with us. But don't be afraid to ask for that introduction, right? I'm constantly telling my friends here in our little town of Ellensburg, I made friends who are local and not affiliated with our university for the first time in my adult life. I have friends outside of work. It's really weird. And one of the things I have to keep reminding them is like, I don't know the people that you're talking about, but I would love to be introduced to them. Like if they're important to you and you want us to do something together, like make an introduction. Let me know who they are and what they do and what it is that we have in common that makes you think like this would be a good fit and like we can make that happen. It's a new thing for people outside of, this type of experience. And so it's a learning process, but it's a helpful one for me because I've done it for so many people. I can kind of guide my friends to be like, yeah, tell me who this person is and why are they here? Because I just don't always know. Don't be afraid to ask for that introduction, especially if there's somebody like higher up the food chain that you want to know. If somebody that knows them, ask for that introduction and be like, hey, I'm like really interested in someday working at this university. Like once I get enough experience to be qualified, can you introduce me to the director that over there, so that I can start building that relationship?
I think it's also a great opportunity to do those informal interviews and meeting people, because if you're looking at a school in the Pacific Northwest and you're looking at a school, down in the Southeast and maybe one up in the Northeast, maybe there's a cultural thing in those areas that could make a difference in which job you choose. Or maybe there's a cultural difference at the specific university. But if you take the time to get that introduction, meet that person, and just have that few minutes to talk to someone about their program, about their campus, about their area, maybe that'll help you in the long run figure out which direction you want to go. I hate the heat, so I probably won't be going down to Florida to work for a job anytime soon. But and hey, maybe you really like diversity, and so you go to a school that's huge on diversity and inclusion. So it's also a great way just to help knock out those things that maybe you realize aren't things that you want. It's not always about finding the ways to get what's best moving forward, but sometimes finding out what's not for you. It all starts with that simple hello and that simple conversation.
Yeah. It's a really interesting experience to go through. So like how I even heard of Central Washington University, right? If you've never heard of CWU before, I won't be offended or surprised. It is a smaller mid-sized school in the middle of nowhere, Washington, right? But I heard about it because an alumnus of my grad school that I met at some reunion social at a NERSO conference like 5 years ago told me about it. And that stuck in my mind, what they had to share about this university, even though they weren't affiliated with it at that time. That person then later became the director at this university and then left to go elsewhere. And I still have a relationship with that individual because A, they were an alumnus who I got to meet in person on that one awkward occasion. And B, because I had an opportunity to start building that relationship when it came time for me to explore positions at the university we both were invested in at that point. That was a relationship that I think helped me to even get the job now, even though they're not here anymore, because I don't think I would have had the relationships existing among the staff at CWU if I hadn't known this person first, right? So those things, those small actions and those people that you meet in those passing interactions can really be beneficial. And last but not least, approaching somebody virtually, again, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, whatever it is, make that connection, request to connect with them, follow up with them, say, hey, I saw you at this thing and I thought it was really cool. Don't like randomly Facebook friend like a person just because you have, 60 mutual friends or whatever. Like make sure you actually follow up, because otherwise on our end, it's like, I don't know who this person is. It's okay to do that. It's okay to shoot somebody that message and say like, hey, I wanted to connect with you because I liked what you had to say about XYZ topic. Or I wanted to ask you more about this. Or I saw that you had this poster in the background of your living room and I thought it was really cool because I like that thing too, right? Like it doesn't have to be that deep to start building that connection there. The other thing to do when it...
Go ahead, Shayna. Finish your
I was
thought.
going to say, the other thing to do when it comes to your peripheral network is there's this concept of name dropping, right? If you're going to drop somebody's name, make sure you have permission to do so. So if, again, you have that connecting person, be like, hey, I want to reach out to this person, but I'm a little bit uncomfortable with it. Is it okay if I mention that I know you and that you recommended reaching out to them, even if they didn't actually do it in that order, right? It can help ease the tension a little bit. And then you can say like, hey, this person said I should connect with you. because you're good to talk to about this thing, and I was hoping we could connect.
And I think also with virtually right now is there's so many different Facebook groups happening. So women in officiating, each region, each different topic area. There seems to be some kind of group somewhere virtually that you, if you have that interest, you can become a part of. So maybe that's a way where, hey, as we're brainstorming these ideas, or maybe you have a question, or you see someone's in this group and they've been talking about a certain topic a lot, maybe you reach out to them privately of saying, hey, I've really noticed that you've been talking a lot about this. Can you tell me more about how this program works at your school? Or how did you get into this? So I think it's a great way to start looking for those different connections and those common interests that are out there as well. So use what you're given now, especially if you are petrified of walking up and shaking hands with someone, start building those connections virtually, because then as we start phasing out of COVID eventually, you'll be more comfortable meeting those people face to face when the time comes.
Some of you might be getting ready or already in the job search process for what comes next, whether it's going into a GA position or going into a professional internship or going into a professional job. These connections can really be helpful in getting you there. So you want to keep nurturing those relationships, building those relationships, establishing them, making sure you have them ready while you're in these earlier stages of that process, and not waiting until you're knee deep in applications and wanting to find out more about this school that you just applied to work at, or this business you just applied to work at. I'm going to talk about that a bit more. So job searching, if you've ever done it before, is absolutely exhausting. Again, it was like that before COVID, but everything is more exhausting with COVID. It's something to always keep at the forefront of your mind, right? We talked about Zoom fatigue at the very beginning of this. That's a very real phenomenon. It's not a unique experience for any of us. And that's just validating to know. We're all tired, we're all burnt out. COVID is draining us in a different way because it's requiring us to use our energies in a different way. Know that, acknowledge that, and then think about how we're going to move forward from that. How are you going to be strategic about how you apply your energy in this process, and where are you ready to go? Because we don't know what comes next, right? We know that things are constantly changing at this point in time. This isn't going to be forever, but we don't know what normal is going to look like anymore. This is our temporary new normal. It might look more like our permanent new normal. We don't know. So we need to prepare for different scenarios. So as we go into the job searching process, think about, again, where are you going to spend your energies with these connections and this networking, so that you can have the most effective experience? Because applying for jobs can also be an experience in and of itself. Every interview you do, every application you fill out, every time you write a new or updated cover letter, every time you update your resume, and then every time you talk to somebody in your network about a position that you're interested in, it's going to benefit you whether you get that job or not. Because then the next time you go through that process, whether it's the next day or the next week, you're going to have learned something from that experience that you can then take forward with you. So ask the people in your network for insight. If they are people that work at the place that you're applying at, if they know somebody who works there, if they are just geographically nearby, if they can give you some insight on things like cost of living or campus culture, business culture, whatever it is. Ask them for that when you're in those earlier stages of applying for the job, because it can be very helpful to know, like, maybe it's not the right fit for you and you don't need to spend your energy on that yet. Or maybe you'll find out something that's actually really exciting about it for you, and makes you want to put more energy into that process where you might have just been kind of mass sending out applications, right? Once you've applied, oh, go for it, Sam.
No, Vicky just put a really, really important comment in the group chat, and I really just want to emphasize it. That if you put a reference down on a job application and you do not let them know, there are a few different ways people handle it. Vicky here says that she may refuse the reference. I have had people tell me that they give the most basic yes, no answers. And that never looks good at all. When you tell people that you are putting them down as a reference, and one, you shouldn't tell them, you should ask. Let's start there. Ask to put someone down as a reference. More often than not, they'll be honest with you on whether or not they're going to give you a good reference. My past coordinator, if she does not feel comfortable giving a good reference, she will tell you, I would recommend finding someone else. And then those that do want to be your reference, they are going to talk you up like there's no tomorrow more often than not, and they will help you through the process. Maybe sit down and ask them to do that mock interview, or another connection that you've had. That's another great way to be connecting virtually. Hey, can I do a mock interview with you through Zoom? It's the first time that I've done it, or all these different resources and different connections that are out there. So please, please, please always ask someone to be a reference before you put them down. They can be your biggest ally and your biggest advocate and your biggest support through the whole process. So thank you very much for throwing that in there. Go ahead, Shayna. It's super important. So
yeah, no, Vicky read my mind, because that was on my list of notes, was like, make sure your references know that they're your references. You might have like an established reference sheet, right? So these are people who know that you're in the job hunt and that they're going to be contacted. And that's really helpful. Like, you've asked them for permission, you kind of have that standardized list of people that the company can contact, right? But let your references know what jobs you've applied for and where, and what things you want them to speak to about you. Because if this is like a leadership position, but you were only a GA for a year, you want them to be able to highlight the things that are going to demonstrate that, because you have that less than 2 years of a GA thing, right? Which is not uncommon, because a lot of us will do internships or other practicums or other things to flesh out our experiences. You want them to know, if they need to emphasize your communication skills or your marketing skills or something that's different. So let them know, like, hey, I'm applying for this job. Here's the job description. I'd really love if you could speak to this about me. If that's not something you feel like you're able to do, please let me know. And then you can find somebody else to fill that role. You also want to be intentional about who your references are. And make sure that you're not just putting names down because they were former supervisors, but again, people who can speak to your character, speak to your integrity, speak to who you are as a person and whether or not you're going to fit in this place. So I had a thought that went with that, and it just went right out my brain.
So I'll jump in while you're thinking on that. For example, when I was applying for jobs straight out of grad school, my 3 references were my director, who was also my professor in a lot of my sport management classes. So he was able to speak to both my work skills and also my knowledge base. I had my coordinator, who I had known for years. I had actually known her at a job I held for 4 years prior to entering grad school. And then I also had my, he started out as my director in intramurals when I was an undergrad student. So I had kept that connection throughout the years that I was able to use him, and he could still speak highly of me even years later because he knew what I was doing. He had kept up on what I was doing now. So it wasn't just my 3 most recent supervisors. They were people who could really speak to me at a broad basis. But is there any professionals on here that want to just give a quick, like, yes, no, how to handle references? We'd like to hear from you all as well, if there's anyone on the call. Maybe.
I can just jump in. I put something in the chat, but I'm Jen. I'm in Toronto, Canada. And I've actually had some students put me down as a reference because they worked in the department, but they didn't actually work under me. I was just the highest name on the list, and I had to decline giving an interview for those. So make sure maybe it is somebody that you've worked with or that's going to recognize your name. That's really important. And then, yeah, make sure people know what you're applying for, because I usually tailor what I'm going to say about the person that relates back to the job that they've applied for. So if they're applying for a referee position and under me, they worked in the office, I'll tailor those office references to like, they're good with numbers, they're good with attention to detail. So that's important to know what job they're applying for as well.
Yeah, Shanna, I'd love to say that I could write a reference for everyone that asks me, but when you get to a certain age, I will use age because I'm aged, that people sometimes ask you for a reference, as was just said, because of who you are, not because of what they know about you. And remember that the person you're asking a reference for is, it's their integrity on the line. If they give a reference to someone that they don't really know and they give a good reference and that employee ends up to not be such a great employee. And so as I've come through the years, it's been a lot easier for me to say, I don't think I am the best reference for you. Have you considered, and then give them some ideas, because I'm not going to put my reputation on the line for somebody that I really can't speak to.
Yeah, and as you had mentioned, you asked for the resume, job description, and strengths insight. So every person that I've always asked for a reference has also asked for those documents, because like you said, it really allows you to tailor your reference to that specific job. And it just gives you, as the person giving the reference, more background information, so you can really speak to the person in the job that they're applying for. So thank you for jumping in. Shayna, do you want to take back your thought process?
Yeah, I lost it. It went away. So moving on. If your resume or cover letter says the phrase references available upon request or anything similar to that, please immediately after this session, get rid of that and make yourself a nice reference sheet that has the same header as your cover letter and your resume, and just automatically give it to them, right? You don't want to wait for them to ask. You want to say, I have people in my corner who are ready to speak for me. Here's who they are. And then if there's like, a thing where you have to fill in all their info on online applications because you have to do everything 10,000 different ways, the same content over and over, do it again. But have that like ready to go reference sheet with the people that you've already talked to and said, hey, I want to apply for this job. Will you be a reference for me?
And I think it's also beneficial to have 4 or 5 or 6 references ready to go so that you can tailor those references to the job. So maybe one of your references knows someone at the school that you're applying for, or they have background information on the exact position you're applying for. That just also allows you to be prepared and have the people prepared, but also put your best foot forward in whichever way that is.
So once you've started connecting with people, you've applied for jobs, now you got to figure out what comes next in terms of this networking process. Again, make sure you're staying connected and checking in with the people, especially the ones who you put on your reference sheet. Let them know where you're at in the process so far. Let them know, what your concerns are, or, if you just want to chat informally about something. Set up, like Sam mentioned earlier, those Zoom coffee meetings. And then when the time becomes available to us to do an in-person coffee meeting, do that too. Talk about the things that are impacting you. Start, again, nurturing those relationships. Professional relationships require nurturing care, just like any friendship or family relationship, etc. So you have to put some time and energy into that. So don't cast your net too wide. Make sure you're being intentional about who you're connecting with and the relationships that you want to have with them. Because these people in your professional network are not only going to be in your professional network if you do it right, they're also going to become the people that are your friends, the people that you spend time with, and the people that you want to spend your energies on, the people that you want to do Zoom bingo with, right? It can be an extremely transformative experience that starts with the professional connection and builds to something really awesome. And again, we don't know what normal is going to look like. So once we have that opportunity to start meeting in person and going to conferences and going to workshops and all of that stuff, connect with those people that you connected with in the last year or however long and say, hey, are you going to be at this thing? I would love to connect with you, grab some coffee and actually meet. That's such a cool thing. I remember when I first connected with my first NERSA mentor way back in grad school a million years ago. you know, we had met over Zoom many times, and then at the annual conference, I was just walking by and I was like, oh, hey, wait, you're the person. And it was really exciting to meet them. And it hadn't crossed my mind to like reach out to them ahead of time and be like, hey, we should connect when we're there. But it was, of course, going to be awkward. It's always awkward the first time you meet somebody, whether you've met them through a computer or not. So just embrace it and move past it as best as you can. And remember that it's awkward for them too. The other thing to keep in mind when we're back to being in person is you're going to find that social professional personality, that person who can be connecting with people on a social level, but also have to maintain some type of professionalism, knowing especially that in the world of sports, we have a tendency to have glasses in our hand that contain certain types of liquid. So be mindful of how much of that you're having, and that again, you can be your authentic self and not have to use it as a social crutch, and be mindful of who's around you and the culture that exists there, and that you don't have to participate in it, but that being sociable in a professional setting can also be extremely beneficial and sometimes even necessary. And then again, once we're back to whatever our new normal looks like again, continue to nurture those relationships. Don't let them fall to the wayside just because we're not in a pandemic anymore. Keep up that authenticity. If you want those people in your corner and you want them to stay in your corner and have your back, you also need to do some work on that. So connect with us. We're people who have offered up how to connect with us, our emails, our LinkedIns. Be authentic with yourselves, ask us questions, follow up, things like that. And now is your chance to, I'll leave this on the screen for a minute, but do people have questions about networking, about references, about anything? We have a few minutes, just a few minutes.
Shayna, while everybody's thinking about a great question, can I suggest that when we are back and we can see each other in person, that one of the things I've noticed is that people get real tentative about approaching people who are, for example, in office or something like that within the association. And I would tell you that the people in this association are there because they care about your development. And that, you know, when you go to a conference, it's like, if you wait for someone to stop a conversation, you will never talk to anyone because everybody's catching up. It's like a family. And so the person that you want to speak to, just stand there, be patient. They will get to you. They will turn to you. They may even interrupt their conversation so that you get their time, but don't hesitate to do that because that's what they love to do, is to have those conversations. So just throwing that out to those of you who kind of get a little tentative around people that are, you know, in positions where you think, oh, they're too busy, or, oh, I could never talk to them. Please do, because that's what they enjoy.
Yeah, 100%. I'll never forget my very first NERSA annual conference. I went with my supervisor and longtime mentor, Adam Pruitt, who is the most social butterfly in all of NERSA. And he dragged me around and was like going up to all of these high level people and was like, we're going to go meet all the NERSA brass. And I was like, are you kidding me? I'm wearing a t-shirt and jeans. We just got off a plane. But the way that he kind of navigated that situation, because these were people that he wanted to build relationships with and wanted to demonstrate how that could work, when it's like, I might not know these people yet, but I'm going to pretend like I do because I know who they are and I'm going to make myself approachable to them. It was so awkward, and I followed that pattern. I do it all the time. I don't give you an option to not know who I am.
And I think speaking from the not so social butterfly side of the spectrum, when I go to these conferences and these different, you know, tournaments and things like that, in the back of my mind, I say, okay, I'm going to make myself talk to at least 3 new people and introduce myself to that, because once you start that ball rolling, it becomes so much easier. Or it's, hey, I just met this person, and they're like, oh, come with me to meet this person. And like they were just talking about, everyone just wants you to feel welcome. I know it is very stressful for me to do these things, but I found ways that work for me. My old coordinator used to laugh because I have a switch. I turn this switch on. I am the social, happy person. who's like knocking it out of the park and I'm doing everything I need to do. But then I know when I reach my limit and I'm like, okay, I need to turn this switch off. I need to go take an hour by myself, go get myself a drink and just recharge and then get back into the conversation, because there are those people out there that can go all day meeting these new people. And then there's people like me who maybe we can't, and we need those times to ourselves to just digest what we've had and really like recharge and, you know, pump ourselves back up to get back into the conversation. And that's okay. You don't have to be the social butterfly. It's finding that balance of like what works for you. So I'm going to challenge all of you on this call, meet at least 3 people virtually during this regional that's happening, and follow up with them with an email, thank someone for being a presenter, and try and set something up for post conference. So 3 people, that's all you got to do, putting the challenge out there, and to start taking what we've talked about today and putting it into action, because the more practice you get, it does get easier. It just takes a little longer for some of us. So that's what I've got. Anyone else? Questions? Someone?
Last final call if there's any more questions. We'd just like to thank you, Shayna and Sam, too, for presenting to us as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
In about 2 minutes, too, we'll be having our keynote presentation. That's right after this presentation as well. But yeah, thank you so much, guys, for presenting.
Jasmine, do you want to do a quick pitch on that resume thing that you put in the chat?
Sure, yes. So we have a session on rectangular resumes on Friday with Mallory Valentine. It'll be a great presentation. She'll talk about resumes, cover letters, all that good stuff.
So it's a great place to start your networking building.
Yep.
And once again,
We all know how to reach us if you want to, so please do connect or connect with other people. If you don't want to reach out to us, that's okay. We won't be offended. If the other people are 3 other people, it's fine.
Just 3.
Thank you. See you guys at the keynote.
All right. Thank you
Congrats.
all. Have a good afternoon.
We did.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Great
No.
job, Jasmine and Andrea. And I'm going to hop off to the keynote.
I messed
Have
up.
fun with everything.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.